Upon receiving your machine, the machine won't have any thread, just like this. Now, for the sake of shooting this training video, we've already gone ahead and threaded up part of this machine. But you'll notice over here, this is how your machine comes. You will see threads hanging in the back just like this, tied off in a loop. Okay, that's there for a reason. Okay, that's there so that we can tie our threads off to this and just pull them through the machine so you don't actually have to physically thread the machine. So I'm going to start by grabbing this and pulling this knot out of here. And now the threads are loose. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cones of thread up here. Now, if you're working with mini cones, the mini cones won't fit on the machine, as you can see. So what you need to do is you take this off, and that will allow me to put the mini cone on the machine. Now they're going to rattle around a little bit, but there's nothing you can do about that unless you wanted to go to a craft store and you can buy little blocks of foam, and you can cut a little block of foam and put a hole down the center, put it over this post, and then put this over it, and that would stop it from rattling. But that's a lot of work for very little reward, but that would make this not rattle. Now when you switch to your standard cones, which as soon as you know what threads you're going to use all the time, you want to switch to your standard cone or your king cone, which is the large one. And when you put them on the machine, your machine comes like this. Well, when I put this on here, when this machine is running, this would vibrate like this, and then the thread would actually roll off of here and get caught underneath the spool, and now you would have a thread break. So the whole point of these little plastic caps, you lift them up and then put your thread on, and when we do so, this doesn't rock anymore, and that's what they're there for. So I'm going to lift all of these up, and then I'm going to put my cones of thread in place. Now, let's talk about placement of cones of thread. Colors like black. Black is a color that we use all the time. We use it for outlining designs. We use it for showing detail in designs. So when you put a color like black on the machine, it's best to put it in the middle of the machine because these threads are harder to get to. The threads that are harder to get to are the ones you're going to leave on the machine because chances are you're never going to take that off. The only time you're going to switch this out is to put a brand new cone of black in its place. The colors that you may change all the time should be the ones that are out at either the right hand side or left hand side of the machine because they're the easiest ones to reach, therefore being the easiest ones to change the thread on. So once we have our cones in place, we're going to take our thread and we want to tie a knot. Now you can tie any knot you want. I prefer to tie a box knot. A box knot is where I take my right hand and my left hand. I put the thread in my right hand behind the thread in my left hand. And then I take this loose end and I pull it around the thread that was in my left hand twice. Once, twice. Then I take the thread that's in my right hand and put it in front of my left hand and pull the thread through this hole once. And now I pull these two ends together and these two ends together, and there is my square or my box, and I pull that taut. I let the loose ends go, and I make sure that that knot is going to hold. Now I'm going to do that for all four. And if you can't make that knot, it really is okay. As long as you make any kind of a nice strong knot is fine. The reason I like this particular knot is because when I do it right, I can actually pull it right through the eye of the needle. We'll start that one over again. So around twice, behind and through, pull the ends together. After tying off all the threads on the machine, then we're going to come to the front of the machine and if the threads were wrapped around this piece over here, we're going to simply get the threads out of there just by winding that backward. And now the threads are all free. And individually, we're going to take one at a time and we're going to just pull the thread through. So I'm just going to pull on this. When the knot gets down to the eye of the needle, I'm going to grab the thread right here. I'm going to pull on it, and I'm not pulling thread out of my hand. I'm pulling thread off the top of the spool. And then I'm going to take my hand, grab the thread close to the needle, and I'm going to pull my hand straight back from the needle. That gives me the best opportunity to have the knot, which is right here now, come through the eye of the needle. So I'm going to continue to do that for each one. So now if you look at the top of the machine, you can actually see the knot coming right through. Okay, the knot right now is coming right through here. You can see it. Now it's coming down. And now it's down here. And now it's going back up, back down. And here it comes down at the bottom. And now I've hit the eye of the needle. Now just like before, I'm going to keep my hand rigid. I'm going to pull slack off the spool. And I'm going to run my hand straight back. And see if it comes through the eye of the needle. Now we'll pull another thread through. Okay, the knot is now at the needle. I'm going to hold this hand rigid. I'm going to pull slack this way off the spool. And then I take my hand and I run it straight back and pull the knot right through the needle. And another one. And I'm going to continue to do that for the entire machine. Okay. Once the threads are all pulled through, then I'm going to take each thread and I'm just going to pull it straight up into the holding spring. This holding spring is only a temporary holder until the machine runs. Once the machine has run, the thread is actually going to pull underneath here to the underside, but the spring is what we use when we first thread the machine to hold it. And after we've pulled all the threads through, then we simply take a pair of scissors and we trim these threads 3/4 of an inch to an inch past the spring. Just like that. Now, we also need to talk about metallic thread for a moment. Metallic thread always needs to go somewhere in this back row of thread. Okay, somewhere along this back row. And wherever you're going to put the metallic thread, in with your machine were these aluminum tubes. Okay, the aluminum tube, wherever your metallic thread's going to go, so let's say it's going to go here. I'll take that thread off. Make sure this is up. And I'll grab the end of the metallic. We'll set it on the machine. And I'm going to take this metal post and I'm going to put it right over that rod, just like that. You'll notice I didn't put thread through the center of it or anything. The thread just rides on the outside of this, and that prevents the thread from kinking, so you don't get a thread break as it gets to the eye of the needle. And now I'm simply going to just use our piggyback technique where we tie this off. Again, using that same knot from before. And it's a good thing I checked that. It was a weak spot in the thread. There we go. And now we'll just go around the front and pull it through. Wherever you put the metallic thread on your machine, you always want to find the main tension knob. That would be this, not the top ones. These are the pre-tension knobs. These are preset for you. Actually, these are preset also. However, if you put metallic thread on there, it runs a little different. So wherever we put the metallic thread, find the corresponding main tension knob, and we want to loosen this. That's a half a turn. That was 1 full turn. That's 1.5. Loosen that 2 full turns. And that'll get us to the proper tension to run metallic thread. Piggybacking the threads onto the machine works great. But unfortunately, there may be a time where you run a thread all the way out where you have to rethread it. If threads break, they're not going to break way up top. They're going to break down in this area here or up in here. So you don't have to worry about it during a thread break. But if you run a spool all the way out, then we do have to rethread the machine. So we're going to start by taking our spool of thread, setting it up on the rack, and wherever that thread's going to go, I'm going to remove the tube. Now, this thread is in the middle row, so anything that's in the middle row is going to go through 2 sets of guides. Anything that's in the back row goes through 3 sets of guides, and anything in the front row goes through just the front guide. So since this is in the middle row, it's going to go through 2 guides. So we go through the first guide, the second guide, and the guides are always directly above where the thread is. So this one starts right up here. Now, when I get to this top pre-tensioner, I simply push down and the thread simply goes underneath the pre-tensioner. We don't wrap it around anything. Now we put the end through the rubber tube. You'll notice I'm putting my finger next to it. The reason I'm doing that is that helps cut down on the static charge that we often get when we're trying to do this. To make this a little bit easier, you can see that the static charge is holding that thread a little bit. Now for the tubes are split. Okay, there's 3 ways I can get thread through here. I could put the thread through a needle and then just drop the needle through the tube. I could start the thread through the end and take a can of compressed air and shoot it through. Or the technique that I prefer to use, I simply take about 6 inches of thread, I put it up near the top of the tube, and I hold it tight up against the tube, and I simply take the end that goes back to the machine and I start winding it backwards through the slits until I get all the way to the top of the tube. Then I grab the other side and I just wind this all the way through till I get to the end. Now once I get through to the end, I'm going to pull on the thread just to get rid of the slack, and I'm going to insert the tube into this rubber cap. When I do this, I want to make sure that I don't pinch the thread. So I'm going to check by pulling on this, and that moves freely, so that's not pinched. Now we can wind this thread back on the spool. I'm not going to in this case. And now I'm going to thread this part of the tube here. Again, you put your finger against it, helps cut down on that static charge. Grab the tube, feed it in there by giving it a little twist. That helps. Again, check it, make sure it's not pinched, and this is not. Now I'm going to just take the two ends, put it between the two washers, and pull up so that it goes into that slot. That's for any compact machine. Any standard machine, the thread goes on the right hand side instead of on the left hand side. Now I take my main tension knob, I start on the right hand side, and I go around my sensor once first, and then my main tension knob I go around one full time, then back up and over the spring. We refer to that as 1.5 times because we started here, went around one full time, and then the additional half to get around the spring. Now I'll make a little loop and pull it into the guides. For this section here, I go through the top guide. I go through this back hole. I come around the metal bar and then go back up. Then through this take-up arm from right to left. Then into the back hole. I lift the light up out of my way. We'll go through the lower guide. And now we're at threading a needle. So now I make sure I have a nice sharp pair of scissors. So when we trim the thread, you never put tension on the thread. You always want to hold above where you're going to cut and cut the thread. And you don't have to put that in your mouth to moisten it for polyester thread. Now we go through the eye of the needle. We go behind the thread guide, through the presser foot, up into the holding spring, and trim the thread 3/4 of an inch to an inch past the holding spring, and bring our light back down.